All right. Good afternoon. And for those who have already joined online and were waiting, apologies for the late start, but we are ready to go with this program. Last year, it was a difficult year for us as an organization. At a point, we weren't too sure what we were going to do with PEJA 2020. We applied for a grant from the German Federal Foreign Office, and we were fortunate to receive some funding. And that is how come we were able to sort out last year's festival. We needed extra money because we needed more technical stuff, and this is how we were able to get those things. In addition to that, we had asked for some money to publish an anthology in which people would write their experiences or write something in response to COVID-19. And we received submissions from several different writers. And what we did then was to match the writers to a number of editors. And at the end of the day, we had an anthology which we titled Resilience, a Collection. This anthology is now available, and we have on stage right now a number of the contributors to the anthology, and also one of the editors of the anthology, Mamle Kabu, who is here in Ghana. The other editors are Chuma Nyokolo, a Nigerian writer, Ejoji Agbozo, a Ghanaian writer but who is not resident in Ghana, and finally Nancy Henaku, who is unable to join us this afternoon. So at this point, we are going to have a mixed conversation and reading, which is going to be moderated by Mamle Kabu. May I try and introduce the guests I have here? I think one person was here and has left, or does no one know? Kofi. There's one person who may be joining us. Here he comes. And so let me start with him. We have Kofi Jogbewu, who is more and more becoming a recognizable writer. Kofi Jogbewu had a thing here, and he also recently launched Aji, which is a novel. And then we have Fabiola Amedo. She is sitting right next to Kofi. We have Eko Manua, and he is right in the middle. Mariska Araba Taylor Darko, and that is Mariska. And we have Wale Opediran, who is also the Secretary General of the Pan-African Writers Association. And then Mamle Kabu, and finally Hene Kofi Chre. Kweku, Hene Kweku Chre, who is a poet. So I hand over directly now to Mamle. Enjoy yourselves.
Thank you for coming.
May I just interject? We have copies of the books available, and we will sell them. But that's the plan. So, so that is okay, Mamle.
We are joined by Ikuya Sewa Amankwa, also a contributor to this collection. Okay, so welcome all. We are starting slightly behind schedule, and we do have another session at 2 here. So I want us to launch straight into it. Okay. Yes, let's launch straight into it because I'd like us to hear something from everybody. And so perhaps I can give each of you 3 to 4 minutes to read so that we are able to finish on time. Okay, Ekwe, I'll let you catch your breath. So Mariska, would it be okay to start with you, please? Mariska Araba Taylor, ladies and gentlemen, please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. So do I read?
Sorry, yes.
It was a wet English summer's day. I had just got back home from the hospital. The usual story. He hit me. No, not hit, but beat me again. The other times that this happened, I covered my eyes with dark glasses when I went out. But this time, my contact lens got stuck to my eyeball and it was swollen. My cheeks were bruised and I had a blue-black eye. I could not hide behind sunglasses. I ended up at the accident and emergency department. We were a normal family like every other family I knew. Not perfect, but then no family is perfect. We had friends from the same country and spoke the same language. Most of our friends worked, and at weekends we got together with our children for barbecues and parties. Going out as a family full of smiles and happiness, shopping for the bring and share afternoons, buying gifts for friends, celebrating birthdays or christenings for their newborn babies were all normal family life. Nothing showed that things would turn out like this, that one day I would not go out because of a bruised face or black eyes. I had left once before when things got violent. It started when he began gambling heavily and losing heavily. He had lost his job, and I was now the breadwinner. It was then that he wanted to show me who had authority in the home. If he gave any money for housekeeping on a Friday, you could be sure that on a Saturday afternoon he'd be demanding it back to bet on a horse race. I had to go grocery shopping by 7 in the morning just to make sure something was in the house before those demands came. The demands came with punches and slaps for being blamed for the horses losing because of my bad luck. When he brought other women into the house in my absence, under the guise of friendship, I knew I had had enough. When I found strange hairs on the pillow, I knew these visits were not just because of friendship, they were intimate relationships. I was accused of being jealous for nothing. I felt hurt that he could sleep with another woman on our marital bed. Any query or attempt at getting answers was just me asking for trouble. I moved out and stayed with a friend while I applied for an injunction to protect me from further abuse. I had also applied for and got legal separation. Due to the repetitive assaults nearly every other day, I was put on the waiting list for another flat for my son and I. Finally, I was offered a 2-bedroom flat. It was 1 street away from my old house. It didn't feel safe, but I accepted the offer. Moving a child from one school to another within the same borough was a long drawn-out process with evaluations and other visits by local social workers. These were things I did not want to go through. For now, my son could attend his school and have contact with his friends. He was my major concern. I will go to another portion briefly. Flash forward. The ambulance driver who brought me home asked if I would be okay. I said yes, I would be fine. I didn't really want to discuss my personal business with him. The shame and embarrassment of the situation made me keep my problems to myself. Before he left, he made sure I was going to be safe by asking me about the security in the house, whether I had changed the locks on the door, and whether I had someone to come and stay with me for a while. I looked up at this middle-aged Englishman, wondering why he wouldn't just leave. "Young lady," he said, "do you intend to be going through this all the time?" I shook my head and tears welled up in my eyes. "Look, nothing stops you from leaving this toxic relationship. You could move to another part of the country. You could leave this country. You should report to the police. Make an effort to save yourself. Do you want your son to bury his mother? I have seen this many times before. Don't feel embarrassed if you have to ask for help. Sometimes you just can't handle a situation on your own." I had never thought about that. That fear of making any drastic decision, that fear of being followed wherever I would run to. That fear that I was useless as I was being made to feel was making me tolerate the intolerable. Just think seriously about what I have said and save yourself. He gave me a list of numbers of various women support groups that he had in his notebook and left. How could I do all the things he had suggested? Was I strong enough to go through all this and come out unscathed? What would people think? I felt hopeless and desperate. Being in such a situation made things go round and round in my mind. How would I manage? Where would I stay? What if he came after me? Would I be safe? The ache in my stomach was never ending.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mariska. That's a very moving story, and I'd love to know how it ends. I'll have to go back to the collection and finish reading it. At the time we were working on it, I had to do a lot of as an editor, I was working with particular writers, so I focused on those ones. But it's really wonderful now to hear from the other writers. Mariska's story was edited by Nancy Henaku. Okay, I think I'd like to call now on Kwesi Ohene Ayi. Is that okay? Have I got the name wrong? Kofi, sorry. Okay, well, it's Kwesi in the book, actually. So we must correct that. So Kofi Ohene Ayi, please, would you give us a reading? Thank you.
I'll be reading A Walker in the City by Sapong Kumankoma.
Okay, for those who have copies of the book, I don't think they're hearing you. Is your mic on?
Hello.
Can you talk a bit louder? Yeah.
I'm reading A Walker in the City by Sapong Kumankoma.
Okay, so for those who have the book, could you give the page number, please? Mm-hmm.
Page 95.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Each speck of dust on my feet is a reminder of every single soul awaiting my return as their Messiah. The cracks on my heels map out the paths I have traveled in search of the paradise I promised. I, a savior, am in need of salvation, but I remain a miracle worker, raining down manna from my hunger. The paths I have taken are across many rivers of tears and sweat, a web of guilt and regrets, with a few faded spots of joy. So while I still walk through this heaven with hope beneath my feet, towards a triumphant return to my people, should I stumble on your feet, do not crucify me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm a little confused because of the Sapong Kumankoma. Is that your another name or?
No, that's not me.
Okay.
I'm just reading.
You're reading on behalf of Sapong. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that reading. Okay. Could I perhaps call on Hene now to give us a piece? Yeah.
All right, so I'm reading Dear Love, or a short speech on resilience. Page 57. I would have loved to quote someone great, somebody important, somebody wise to begin this speech, but I begin anyway. Louder, okay. I would have loved to quote somebody great, somebody important, somebody wise to begin this speech, but I begin anyway. I would have spoken of revolutions and the art of not giving up. I would have loved to speak of all the women and men who had to be sacrificed for Africa to be free, of the men who had to set themselves on fire to light the spirit of the revolution, of the women who had to bleed themselves to invoke the courage in their dying men, of slave ships and ancestors. I would have loved to present to you courage, neatly wrapped in words, songs, and actions, Here is my fist. Up, chant with me. Bleed with me, chant with me. Stand up, fist up. But I will speak of waist beads and my love for them, and them on my love. Waist beads says a lot more than I can say. They mean a lot more than I can mean. I know we could break apart tomorrow, or even the next second, but tell me another thing that has seen more breakings than waist beads. Tell me another thing that has seen more fire, more hammering, more bending than waist beads. Tell me something as graceful as waist beads. What symbol of a revolution sounds stronger than waist beads? Sing a song, take a stand, raise a fist. When one breaks, another takes place. There are no ranks, no lows and highs. Same chant, same song. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let me just add that these last two poems were edited by Ejoji Agbozo, who couldn't be with us today, unfortunately. Okay, I think it's time to hear from somebody whom I edited. So, Ekuya, I will call upon you, please. Please give us a short reading.
Thank you.
That's Ekuya Sewa Amankwa.
Thank you. I'll be reading from Fafanto, page 7.
Louder, please.
Fafanto, page 137. Everything shifted the day Eno chanced upon her 7-year-old self in her old neighborhood, the decadent ridge with its verdant trees.
Ekuya, could you slow down slightly and then talk a bit louder, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Everything shifted the day Eno chanced upon her 7-year-old self in her old neighborhood, the decadent ridge with its verdant trees. Of course, anyone seeing their mini-me 21 years later would have gasped in fright or prayed it's a dream. But it was not a dream, and Eno was too intrigued, too filled with wonder and a dull emotion she couldn't describe. Wish. Yeah. Are you sure? All right.
Use it.
Oh, no. What are you saying? Okay, that'll be fine. She had seen many of her younger selves before, but they were always blurred, meaningless blobs of strangers stuck in different times. This was something else. The young one was right here in the flesh. She was back in the affluent ridge estates, filled with neighbors who lived large, exporters of cocoa, merchants and market queens of Makola, owners of gigantic warehouses and businesses from tiles to tires. Her family had no such background. They had moved here thanks to Dad's smart money decision. It was 1996, and people burned by the Pyram scam now kept their money at home and viewed banks with skepticism and disdain. Dad had signed up for it early and brought the striped green and white forms home. This was how they had bought their semi-finished home in Ridge and completed it. When church members came, he joined them in prayers of torture for the Pyram directors, leaving out that he had enjoyed his fair share of interest. Everything seemed scaled down now. The childhood home that had been a mansion to her now looked like an average 2-story. A sleek black Peugeot crawled up the driveway next door, and a family in a resplendent kente came out, chattering excitedly. In other driveways, kids were laughing, riding bicycles, jumping rope, girls shrieking over a game of tumatu. She watched, mulling over the carefreeness of childhood. She had not been carefree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Fafanto means butterfly, doesn't it? So that is actually a metaphor for the protagonist of the story and what she is trying to be and what she really is. I really love that analogy, that metaphor in your story. Thank you very much. Could we now call on you, Wale, please, to read us a piece?
Thank you. Mine is a non-fiction piece.
I hold it for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mine is a non-fiction piece. The title is COVID-19 and the Artistic Resilience. And it's just to give an overview of how writers and artists fared during the pandemic. I'll just go to the last part on page 153 on the way forward of all the predicaments. And one of the things I said here is financial empowerment for writers. I said many writers face the challenge of earning a living off writing, leading to the common financial difficulties for writers who have no other profession to rely on. I haven't taken notice of this, or the very small percentage of African writers who make a living from their writing careers. The Pan-African Writers Association recently commenced an empowerment project for African female writers. The project, which will provide some levels of financial support for interested writers when fully operational, and will assist the writers in augmenting their incomes from writing. And then I went on to page 154, online publishing. Digitalization has led to profound changes in the market for authors' works, a situation that significantly impacts their earnings. The U.S. Authors Guild reported the growing dominance of Amazon, along with loyal royalties and advance for mid-list books, which publishers typically blame on losses they are forced to pass on. This includes the extremely low royalties paid on sales that are deeply discounted and low net royalties of 25% on e-books. The rise in online publishing has also encouraged a surge in self-published authors. Amazon has become one of the chief beneficiaries for this self-publishing boom, offering one of the main platforms where independent authors can sell their titles and access print-on-demand services. In many countries, Amazon is now central to both independent and traditional publishing businesses. I went on to talk about virtual meetings and arts events. I went on to talk about social media, improved relationships with publishers, the need for legislation and policies, and then finally, on the need for collaborations. I said, in the face of impending dwindling finances for literary activities, it would be a good idea for literary organizations to collaborate in executing their various projects. The organizations can also use the joint effort to pool resources together to achieve more. The Pan-African Writers Association is already collaborating with some arts organizations and is willing to do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wale Okediran, Head of Power. That is a very, very important article for writers to read. It's we shouldn't only be talking about our stories and so on. We should be talking about the harsh realities of being writers, getting published, getting sold, being able to stay alive while we do all those things. So I really appreciate that article. I've been in such a hurry to make sure everybody gets a chance to read that I haven't talked much about the theme, but the theme is resilience, as is written on the cover of the book, is the title. And all the pieces submitted had some connection with that theme, yes. Okay, so next I'd like to invite Eko Manoa to read, please. I particularly enjoyed editing Eko's story because he wrote in Ghanaian Pidgin, which is a language. I think we often don't recognize that Pidgin is a language in its own right. Pidgin is a language in transition, really. It's a language that contains elements of our history. It's a language that people use when perhaps they find difficulty using some of the other languages that are on the table. It's so much a part of our life in Ghana. I haven't encountered many stories written entirely in Pidgin, so I found this one very unique and remarkable. Please give us a short reading.
Hello. I will be reading from Cupola Country. It's on page 129. Sunday, get up. Charlie, I forget up. What did they itch? How for do? Sami no day. Hey, oh my goodness gracious, yes, Christo. My body they itch. Like I for bath or something. I forgo my parents in there. See if some money they waits me. Mommy go like see me serve. But Poppy, Charlie, Sunday come out. Charlie, what have to do? What have to do? These are the thoughts of a man, well, a boy, at the tail end of a drug binge that had seen him gallivant the streets through the night from Osu to Pig Farm, looking to score any sort of high. This boy is Kwamina, and it's the early hours of a Tuesday morning, 16th March, 2029. However, it is of no consequence which date Kwamina wakes to. The way this day unfolds is similar to each one since he left his parents' house and took with the Sami crew. Now, Sami's crew offered Kwamina something of a rope to a life of acceptance, at the very least, and fraternity, of which he had been quite deprived in the crammed compound of his family's household. Kwamina would sometimes reminisce about the life he had had under his family's rusting roofing sheets, nights spent on his backside with his hands tight behind his sides to squeeze in with his sweaty older brothers. Musty armpits mixed with footballing feet, mornings marching to the water stations to fetch water and carry water back in time for his father's breakfast, sneers following him with accusations of being effeminate from street boys, but mostly from his own brothers. Then, afternoons spent with his mother at the marketplace, loving at times, stern when times were rough, which was the case most of the time. Yes, that was the old life, and he wanted nothing more to do with it. Nothing more to do with it. But even he would admit, when he was sober enough to, that his new life came with one too many caveats. Just the previous nights, he, Sami, and Tiwa had ambushed a car at the traffic lights. Tiwa, an on and off member of the crew, had approached the car pretending to wipe the windscreen. And while the driver shooed her away, Kwamina had smashed the passenger window with a rock. Sami followed hot on his tail in an attempt to force themselves into the passenger seat. Well, obviously, this was all done under the influence of a toxic combination of tramadol and codeine stirred together in a pot, and concoction that made them more drowsy than any carjacker needed to be. Needless to say, the target sped off in a cloud of dust and screeching tires. Afterwards, Sami and Kwamina went their own way. They first went back to scratch and sniff up the residue of their earlier concoction. Then they hit the dimly lit streets of Old Accra to continue their hunt for money or drugs. Unfortunately for the two, they ended up falling asleep instead. And this is where we find our protagonist, Kwamina, waking up from an anxious sleep amid 15 other lost souls spread on the pavement in front of a KFC.
Thank you so much, Echo. Actually, it's not all in Pidgin, like I said, but there's quite a few sections which are the sort of stream of consciousness of the protagonist, Kwamina, and I found those great. And actually, I'd like to see more writing like that. Okay, fantastic. So we have, I think, only one person left to read, Fabiola Amedo, who wrote a story that I still think about sometimes because it always makes me very emotional. It's a deeply tragic story, beautifully written, and the end is kind of devastating, really. It's very understated, and it's very historical as well. I learned a lot from reading Fabiola's story, as I did from Echoes as well, actually. In fact, all of them. So, Fabiola, please, will you give us a short reading?
Okay. So, I Am Kwame is found on page 21 of the Resilience Anthology. I read, "My beloved people, I write this letter to you in my capacity as the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and the rightful head of the Republic of Ghana. Imperialist forces are growing stronger every day, relentless in their goal to topple my government and impose their new colonial ideas on our people. It is unfortunate that the armed forces and the police, filled with men who supposedly embody valor and honor, took advantage of my presence while I was on official duty in China to plan a coup against me. They are nothing but cowards, and I, by this letter, order them to return to their posts with immediate effect. My people, do not be fooled by the benevolence of the imperialists. They pose as nation builders, promoting a democratic cause with fake smiles, but they are renegades who secretly will that the United Africa agenda fails. They are power thirsty and act as though this world is not big enough to accommodate more than one superpower. I have big dreams for Ghana, and the dreams cannot be fully realized until Kwame, Secretary stops me in the middle of my letter and draws my attention to a commotion outside our shared office. I leave the letter on the desk and walk towards the dimly lit corridor. I see a woman standing at the entrance with my closest aide, Dr. Bisu. She is clad in emerald green kaba and slits with blue streaks which complement her earth brown skin. Her navy blue duku covers portions of her dense, woolly hair, which she momentarily adjusts after lifting a toddler from the ground. She seems concerned, engrossed in conversation with the doc. This woman has been coming here consistently, and she claims she is my wife. She looks good enough, but she cannot be Fatia, my Egyptian princess. She looks nothing like her. I reach for Fatia's picture, which I jealously guard in my suit pockets. I try to tell Seku to ensure his guards do not let her in. I don't want to see her. She's always barging into the hallway like she owns Seku's presidential palace. Each time, she comes with 3 little people who obviously bear no resemblance to me. She brings food just before lunchtime, and I have been suspicious of what the contents may be. I am no fool. I deduce that she has been sent by conspirators working together with the imperialist forces to poison me and finally put me to rest. Her eyes meet mine, and immediately she conjures tears and wails, drawing the attention of the guards. This woman must be an actress because she outperforms herself each time. I dismiss the disruption and proceed with my letter. This letter must reach the Ghanaian press before noon on Friday.
Thank you so much, Fabiola. Since you waited to, you were the last to read, I will ask you first a little bit about your inspiration. Now, the rest of this story, basically, the narrator is somebody who has lost his mind and believes that he's Kwame Nkrumah. And the rest of the story goes to show us the history of this person and the tragedy that led to this outcome. I found this story so intriguing and so memorable. I'd love you to just tell us briefly what inspired it.
So the inspiration for this story really stemmed from my passion for history, and of course I love Kwame Nkrumah because we grew up learning about Kwame Nkrumah, social studies class, what he did for Ghana, and I realized we didn't really have a lot of books on him in our libraries, etc. So there was this book that I think he authored, which was Dark Days in Ghana. And I was really intrigued by his account of what happened, etc. So it inspired me. I started to think about what happened to people who suffered as a result of the coup, like the citizens. What possibly happened to them? So I just thought up this story of somebody who had suffered the effects of the coup, the tragedy that he had to go through, etc. So that was what inspired the story, and it's kind of, fused with a bit of history, some actual accurate accounts, but then mixed with fiction as well.
It's great. It's a real history lesson, and also mental illness. Yeah, please go ahead. Mental illness is something that is increasingly discussed and written about. It's one of the topics of many stories that I have read and published stories that I've read in the past couple of years. So it ties those two together. I love the place where he says to the doctor, but don't you know I am Kwame? And that's the title of the story. Yes, okay, we don't have all that much time left, but I'd like us to hear a little bit from each person about their inspiration. Would anybody like to volunteer to tell us a little bit about their inspiration? Yes, please. Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you. This story was inspired. I was in class and we were treating A Child in the House by Walter Pater, and it delved into this past of the child and how it affected the child's future. So I was thinking of the cyclical nature of life and how our past fits into our present. And I wanted to fuse it with what everybody calls the 90s nostalgia. Everybody is so excited about what happened in the 90s, but the 90s is not happy for everybody. So I decided to go the other way and talk about someone who had really been tortured in her childhood. And I also wanted to make the point that a lot of times what happens in people's present is informed by their past. A lot of times people are not able to make some decisions in their present because they have some dark histories and things they have to confront. And so I moved back and forward with this story to show that, yes, you might have all of these little things you are dealing with in your past, but until you reach out and talk about them, they will actually metamorphose into a little human being, because in this story I talk about the young Enu. And so they can actually metamorphose into little beings that follow you everywhere and that invade your thoughts. So that's what I wanted to achieve with this story.
Sorry? Of course. I think that's a fantastic description of a fantastic story. You actually have the narrator as a little girl narrating her story, but witnessing it all over again. So I do recommend, really, you guys have to just buy this collection. Okay, Wale, over to you next.
Thank you. Well, my own contribution follows with what we are going through. When I was asked to come over to Ghana and run the Pan-African Writers Association in the middle of a pandemic, I almost ran back to where I was coming from because it was difficult to do much with everybody hiding in the bedrooms and officials refusing to pick your calls and everybody telling you not to come near them. And of course, we had to be creative in doing things. And that was when we decided to do most of our activities virtually. As a relatively young old man, I had to go and learn more of the technology, everything about Twitters and all the social media, how to use the latest in all the texts. Luckily, I had a very brilliant programs officer, young lady who just left school. So she became, in quotes, the Secretary General while I was the assistant. So anyway, we were able to be creative and we used a lot of new things to push. We did a lot of our conferences virtually. We were able to go into e-publishing. And by and large, we discovered that apart from the lack of physical meetings, we achieve more at little cost. For example, if you want to organize an international conference for African writers, you have to bring them all to Ghana or take them to somewhere else. You have to pay flight tickets, hotel, everything. But now with a Zoom, 2 hours or 1 hour, we're able to put together all writers from the continent. We are getting a lot of good results. And that's what prompted me to put this together and to say that the COVID wasn't that bad. We were able to do some things. Although some of my friends still, they miss all the cocktails and the dinners that goes with conferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Wale. I think the silver lining to COVID is one of the biggest aspects of resilience that we can talk about. And I really applaud you on learning all those things in such a short time. That is very impressive. I'm still grappling with many of them. Would anybody else like to volunteer to go next to talk about inspiration? Actually, you're just here, so.
Thank you. So, my work was, I think, inspired by our own icon, Amata Edu. I think she has this poem on Poetry Foundation that talks about waist beats. I think the title is Ghana. And I've loved that poem since the first time that I read it. And I think I've written about 2 or 3 works from that inspiration. And also looking at, during the pandemic, the protests that were happening in Ghana, So all of that tying into what we're going through at that point was what inspired the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will briefly have the others talk about the inspiration because we are going to need to wrap up. Yeah, Mariska? You need to hold it maybe.
Yeah. Mine, if I raise my voice, can you hear me? Okay. Mine was, should I say, part of it is fact and part is fiction. But I wanted to narrate how single mothers struggle. People think single mothers are people who may have had an affair, had a child, and no husband. But then there are single parents who went through the system, properly married, everything, but things go wrong. And they end up being single parents. And they struggle even more than, let's say, somebody who is single, hasn't been through the securities and everything, and is making it. Because they've had all the security, and everything has crumbled in front of them. So they show resilience, their determination, and the usual thing of a mother always fights for the security of their child, no matter the situation. So I wanted to put the things together. Some emotional parts in it actually happened to me, so I admit. So I hope none of my in-laws, former in-laws, are in the crowd because they won't accept the truth, but that is the truth. So thank you.
Thank you so much for writing so beautifully and talking so beautifully about a very familiar scenario. There's nothing to admit. We are very proud of our resilience. Okay.
Hello.
Please, yeah.
So the inspiration for Cupola Country was a mixture of things. I being an Accra ignorant person, I went to Tamale to visit a friend thinking that, oh, there won't be any good time there. But I went there and apparently people, are taking tramadol recreationally. So so this was the thing to do in Tamale with the young adults. And obviously in Accra, when you just drive up and down the streets, you can see for yourselves what is going on. You have, children on the streets, scampering on the side of the roads. And for me, as a writer, I always try and write about the future to highlight the problems today. Because, and I think Ghana is really one of the big examples of that. There's this allure that we are progressing and everything is good and, we're there. But we all know, as we sit here, that we're not there. So I wanted to combine these two things. What will happen when these neglected children have nowhere else to go and there's these drugs on the streets and they have access to that? And then what happens when, they start forming these sort of informal gangs, or really just gangs? And so what happens when these things mix? And then, we have crime, which we are seeing increasing steadily in our city. So these are the things I wanted to highlight in my story, Cupola Country, with Kwame Na and his experience of, having his family and leaving his family because he felt he was not accepted for many reasons. And then he found this acceptance in this place because they were all marginalized and they were not accepted in this new Ghana that was meant for this group of people, but not his people.
Fantastic explanation. Thank you so much, Echo. As I say, it was an education to read that story. I was given tramadol after major surgery. And after I learned that people were taking it just, through addiction, they were taking it as a recreational drug, so to speak. I was really shocked. And then when I read your story, I was like, okay, this thing is real. So it taught me a great deal. It's beautifully written. Yeah, you guys are going to have to buy the book. So now we'll talk to Kofi about, Kwame. I'm so sorry. Yes, about inspiration.
Since my piece is not here, I would just say I'm really inspired and moved by all the pieces in here.
Okay, but your name is in here, so I'm a bit confused. Okay. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about it later. Okay, I'd like to thank all my panelists for making this such a great panel, despite the fact that we were short of time. I still feel that we got a lot out of it. I'm not going to call all their names again because I know you're going to buy the book now that you've heard these pieces from it. I would like to congratulate all of you for excellent writing. It was a pleasure to write with this. It was a pleasure to edit for this collection, and I think we may declare it duly launched. Upside down. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience.